On this week's show, we've got 5.4 patch notes to go over and the just announced new champion, Bard. All that and more on this week's Waypoint. What's up, guys, and welcome to Waypoint, your weekly League of Legends recap. I'm your host, Gary Gannon. Riot have been on a roll releasing some really cool champions lately, and it doesn't look like that trend is stopping anytime soon. Bard, the Wandering Caretaker, was announced this week. He's a support class, and he has some really cool abilities, so let's dive into them. First up, his passive has two main components. The first makes sacred charms to appear on the map. Bard can collect these charms for a brief burst of move speed, mana, and most importantly, experience. Secondly, Bard's present attracts small spirits to his side. Whenever the Bard attacks, a spirit throws itself at the target, dealing extra damage. As he collects more charms, the spirits that follow him grow in number and power. His Q is like a weird mix of Morgana and Lux. Straight line skill shot damages and slows the first target struck. The spell then travels through the target, and if it hits a second enemy or hits a wall, it stuns both targets. Okay, it probably doesn't stun the wall, but wow, is this a cool ability. His W creates a health pack on the ground, which allies can walk over to gain health and move speed. But if an enemy stands on it, it gets destroyed.
Summoners, be prepared to be incredibly frustrated by your teammates in solo queue never walking over it.
Alright, now this is where things get really crazy. Bard's E creates a portal on a target wall. No matter how long that wall is there, the Bard and all champions on the map, including enemies, can use that portal to travel through the wall. This is such an awesome spell. We're going to see some amazing Bard highlight videos as well as some amazing Bard fail videos, and I, for one, cannot wait to see them. His ultimate is also really interesting, again, affecting your allies as well as your enemies. In a good-sized AoE, all units in the target area, including turrets, are frozen in stasis. All frozen units are immune to damage for the duration of the effect. This is absolutely nuts and such a powerful ability in teamfights. You don't always have to freeze your own team, but if you do, as long as you freeze the enemy carries in the process, who cares? Bard looks like a top-tier support, unless his numbers completely suck, which I doubt. Next up, moving on to the patch 5.4 notes, we've got some really interesting things to talk about this week. I want to start with Kassadin, because last episode we mentioned the massive range nerf to his ultimate that was in testing on the PvE. Well, guess what? It's not in testing anymore. It's actually hit live servers. His ultimate range has gone from 700 to 450, which is about as far as a flash. To compensate, the base cost of Riftwalk costs 15 less mana. This seriously has to be one of the most heavy-handed nerfs we've seen from Riot in a long time. Moving on, Janna's passive no longer gives her bonus move speed, but that's a wash because the passive on her W gives her more. What her passive does now is it basically gives her a free pair of captain's boots. Allies moving towards Janna run faster and even more so than before, from 5% to 8% with a decently increased range too. Looks like she'll still be top tier and probably actually better in some comps now. Jarvan's completely dominated the jungle in Season 5, so it's no surprise to see Riot toning him down a bit. The way they've done it though is pretty interesting. His flag no longer grants passive armor, and to compensate, he gets 3 more base armor. It's hard to say how much this is actually going to hurt him, but it does look like it'll be a noticeable nerf. Next up, let's talk Kalista. Now that people have learned to play her, she has been kicking ass and putting out huge numbers in competitive play. Riot have nerfed the time it takes between the start of her auto attacks and the moment it fires, which, because of her passive, makes her jump around a lot less. It still scales well with her attack speed, but not quite as well as it did before. This is going to be mainly an early game nerf. Even so, still a top tier AD carry for sure, and this nerf won't be too noticeable once you get an attack speed item or two. Next up, the long-awaited Mordekaiser rework has arrived, which was more than needed after the removal of DFG. For starters, he has 5 less base health regen, but his Q and W cost less health to cast. Maybe slightly worse in the laning phase, but we'll have to wait and see. His Q now grants 75 more range for the attack, which is great, and his revamped W can now be cast upon an ally to give both targets the effect. That's going to be super useful for engages, ganks, and protecting your backline. Mordekaiser's E remains the same, but his ultimate's changed quite a bit. Enslaved champions no longer give attack damage. Instead, they give him 25% of their bonus health and 30% of their ability power. Enslaved champions no longer gain 75% of Mordekaiser's AP and no longer gain 75% of his total attack damage. Instead, they get 25, 50, 100 attack damage, depending on the rank. Next up, Veigar changes. Another champion who was really hurt by the removal of DFG, although surprisingly he started appearing in the support role in 5.3. This rework looks like it's going to hurt Veigar as a support champ, although it might bring him back to mid. His Q is now an 850 range skill shot that passes through the first target and stops on the second, damaging both. His W, which is the meteor that comes down from the sky, is the same, other than a mana cost and cooldown buff. In this case though, the same also means still incredibly hard to land. It's going to be even harder to land thanks to the change to his AoE stun. The cost and cooldown have been buffed, and its range has gone up by 50, which is nice. However, there's now a 0.75 second delay before it appears, which is pretty painful if your opponents are awake. Finally, his ultimate's cost and cooldown were buffed, but his AP ratio has gone slightly down, although it is still a massive 1.0 ratio. Alright, next up, Zilean received some changes. His Q is now a skill shot, which I'm always a fan of. It sticks to the first enemy or ally hit and then explodes after a few seconds. And check this out. If you double bomb someone, the first bomb blows up and stuns all enemies in the area for 1.5 seconds. This will be sick in team fights. The duration of his E speed up or slow has been severely nerfed, but the slow amount is now 99% at rank 5, which is absolutely insane. It may as well be a root at that point. Rewind no longer reduces the cooldown of his ultimate, and the max rank cooldown of Chrono Shift is down to just 60 seconds. Overall, these Zilean changes are the highlight of the patch for me, and we are definitely going to be seeing a lot more of him. That does it for this week's episode of Waypoint. For more video game news and content, head on over to GameBreaker.tv. Be sure to check back every week for the latest League of Legends news. If you enjoyed this video, please like and be sure to share it on Facebook. We really do appreciate it. And if you want more League of Legends content, recaps, and updates, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, LOL Nation TV. I'm Gary Gannon. You can follow me on Twitter at Gary Gannon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next Waypoint.